Catherine Susan Kitty Genovese was born on July 7, 1935, in Brooklyn, New York, to Vincent and Rachel Genovese. Genovese, the eldest of 5 children, attended Prospect Heights High School, where she was recognized for her academic excellence and was elected class cut-up during her last year. The family moved to New Canaan, Connecticut, when Genovese's mother saw a murder on the streets in 1953, the year she graduated. Despite this, Kitty Genovese continued to work in New York City as a secretary at an insurance business, and then as manager of Ev's 11th Hour, a bar in the Hollis section of Queens. This led to her relocation to Queens. 10 years later, in a Greenwich Village bar, Genovese met Marianne Zielonko, her future girlfriend. Together, the two live in a second-floor apartment in Queens Kew Gardens, a quiet and secure neighborhood. A man brandishing a knife approached Kitty Genovese as she was on her way home from work on March 13, 1964, at approximately 2:30 in the morning. Genovese screamed as the man grabbed her and stabbed her as she raced toward the front door of her apartment complex. The assailant left after hearing Robert Moser, a neighbor, yell through his window, "Leave that girl alone." With severe injuries, Genovese crawled to the back of her apartment building to hide from potential witnesses. Her assailant reappeared 10 minutes later, raped her, stabbed her, and took her money. Sophia Farrar, a neighbor, discovered her and yelled for someone to contact the police. A few minutes later, the police showed up. While traveling to the hospital in an ambulance, Genovese passed away. When police arrived at the flat at 4 in the morning, they told Zielonko about Genovese's death and the stabbing. To question Zielonko, who was receiving alcohol comfort from his neighbor Carl Ross, Detective Mitchell Sang didn't arrive until around 7 in the morning. After finding Ross to be unruly throughout the interrogation, Sang arrested him. Sang was also aware of the fact that Genovese's body was found at the foot of the stairs that led to Ross's flat. Following that, homicide detectives Jerry Burns and John Carroll questioned Zielonko about her relationship with Genovese. The 6 hours of inquiry took an unwarranted turn and concentrated on their sexual lives. A significant portion of the neighbors' police interrogations exposed a fixation with homosexuality. Zielonko was regarded as suspicious. Police received a call about a possible robbery later that week. A television was discovered in the suspect's vehicle's trunk when the cops arrived. After being detained and brought to the station, Winston Moseley admitted to repeatedly stealing appliances. After recalling that some witnesses to Genovese's murder had mentioned seeing a white car, Detective John Tartaglia was impressed that Moseley was driving a white Corvair. Moseley was informed of this, but remained silent. Tartaglia brought in detectives John Carroll and Mitchell Sang. They charged Moseley with Genovese's murder after noticing scabs on his hands. In response, Moseley said he had information that only the murderer would know, and he confirmed it. While sitting in his parked automobile, Moseley noticed Genovese at a traffic light and followed her home. He did not provide a reason for the attack, but admitted to driving throughout Queens in search of a victim. Moseley had no records, was married, and had 3 children. During further interrogations, Moseley admitted to multiple additional rapes and the deaths of Annie Mae Johnson and Barbara Kralik. On June 15, 1964, Moseley was given a death sentence, which was later lowered to life in prison in 1967. Later on, he would say that the mafia killed Genovese and that he was just the getaway driver. According to Moseley's son, Genovese's racial epithets were the reason behind Moseley's attack. At the age of 81, Moseley passed away in custody on March 28, 2016. In an article titled 37 Who Saw Murder Didn't Call the Police, published in the New York Times on March 27, 1964, it was claimed that several neighbors had heard or seen Genovese being murdered, but had taken no action to assist her. Police Commissioner Michael Murphy made the accusation that served as the basis for the article during a conversation with Times editor A.M. Rosenthal, which inspired the creation of the piece. The next day, the newspaper published a follow-up piece interviewing multiple psychologists to analyze why people decided not to engage. Rosenthal turned this material into a book titled 38 Witnesses, The Kitty Genovese Case, later that year. The New York Times report has revealed numerous factual inaccuracies. It has also been accused of fabricating a social phenomenon for dramatic effect. The bystander effect, also known as the Genovese syndrome, is a phenomenon that aims to explain why a witness to a crime would choose not to assist the victim. The bystander effect is the focus of the careers of psychologists Bibb Latané and John Darley. In clinical trials, they have demonstrated that witnesses are less inclined to assist a crime victim in the presence of other witnesses. It is less probable that any one person will step in the more witnesses there are. The media utilize the bystander effect as a parable to illustrate how morally bankrupt modern society has become, and how it has lost its empathy for others, especially in urban areas. Moseley testified during his trial in favor of an insanity defense and admitted to killing Genovese. In his evidence, he stated that he went out of his residence early on Friday, March 13, 1964, with a hunting knife to find a woman and kill her. He saw Genovese driving a red automobile at about 3 in the morning and followed it for about 10 blocks. After stepping out of their separate cars, Genovese began running after spotting Moseley. As he put it, Moseley grabbed her and stabbed her twice in the back. Moseley went back to his car and moved it because someone had shouted out from an open window. But he could see that Genovese had gotten up and that she wasn't dead. He returned and searched the Long Island Railroad station for Genovese, since he didn't think the person who had called would come down to aid her, even if she had yelled. After searching a few nearby apartment complexes in vain, Moseley discovered her in a hallway. She began screaming as soon as she saw me, so I stabbed her several more times to stop her from yelling. After the first stab to the neck, she simply whimpered. Moseley filed a motion under New York State Criminal Procedure Law, Section 440.10, on February 1, 1989, seeking to overturn his conviction. He claimed that Sparrow's previous defense of Genovese had created a genuine conflict of interest, which had violated his Sixth Amendment right to effective legal representation. This was the first time Moseley had brought up the argument of ineffective legal help. Moseley included a letter from a Newsday newspaper columnist discussing Sparrow's previous defense of Genovese and the prospect of contesting the conviction on that basis with his Section 440.10. The letter was dated May 23, 1979, over 10 years before his motion. On May 1, 1989, Justice Charles J. Thomas of the New York State Supreme Court dismissed Moseley's request. Choice New York State Criminal Procedure Law Section 440.10, motion denied. Justice Thomas made his ruling based on 3 considerations. Justice Thomas finally concluded that Moseley knew of Sparrow's alleged conflict before Sparrow was sentenced, or at least when the Newsday writer told Moseley about it, and that Moseley's delay in submitting the motion questioned the integrity of his assertion. Moseley filed this habeas petition on March 30, 1990. Once more, Moseley argues that Sparrow's previous representation of Genovese created an unconstitutional conflict of interest that prevented him from providing helpful assistance. He further contends that his conviction must be automatically overturned because the trial court neglected to investigate this disagreement. Respondent contends that Moseley cannot bring these claims to the federal court due to procedural restrictions. Additionally, the respondent contends that he has not proven that Sparrow provided services should the court rule that Moseley is not so precluded. Assistance that violates the Constitution or the trial court erred in not conducting a conflict investigation. For the following reasons, the court finds that Moseley is not precluded from bringing his claims before this tribunal due to procedural issues. However, the court finds that Moseley still needs to prove his eligibility for habeas corpus relief, having carefully reviewed all of the evidence presented during the hearing, examined the state court proceedings, and examined relevant case law. Bill Genovese, Genovese's younger brother, produced and narrated the 2015 video The Witness, which makes a compelling argument against the Times reporting. It has been demonstrated that only 2 neighbors behaved, as the Times said 38 individuals did at the time of the murder. Carl Ross was one of those. That evening, while intoxicated, Ross heard sounds and cautiously opened his door to look at them. He witnessed Moseley stabbing Genovese while she lay on the ground, still breathing and making an effort to talk. After closing the door, he dialed a friend to get advice. The friend advised against becoming involved. Eventually, Ross scaled his window and went to an apartment next door. He heard Sophie Farrar yell for someone to contact the police, so he did. "I didn't want to get involved," Ross said, and this became the well-known response of the bystander effect. After officials from New York City joined a nationwide movement that included officials from other cities, the murder of Kitty Genovese was recognized as one of the factors that led to the implementation of the emergency 911 system. In 1968, it was designated as the national emergency number. Thanks for your attention. Please leave a comment, like and subscribe to the channel, or email at crimesabroad@outlook.com for more cases.